The conference room went silent when Bradley said it. Not the kind of silence where people are thinking, but the kind where everyone stops breathing. "Let's be honest, Mavis," he announced, leaning back in his chair with that smirk he saved for moments he thought made him look powerful. "Anyone on this team is replaceable. Including you." 15 faces stared at their laptops. Nobody moved. I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my expression neutral, the same way I'd learned to do when he took credit for my work or rewrote my reports with worse grammar. This wasn't anger speaking. This was planned. His eyes weren't even on me anymore. They were scanning the room, measuring reactions, enjoying the performance. Then I noticed Patricia from HR in the back corner, notepad open, pen moving. She wasn't taking meeting notes. She was documenting this. That's when I knew this wasn't just cruelty. It was the beginning of something bigger. The meeting ended and everyone scattered like roaches when the lights come on. Nobody made eye contact. Nobody stopped by my desk. By lunch, the usual group chat had gone completely quiet. I sat alone in the break room, eating leftover pasta that tasted like cardboard, watching colleagues I'd worked with for 6 years suddenly find reasons to use the other microwave. The shame stuck to me like smoke. I kept replaying Bradley's words, the way he'd said, "including you," like he was doing me a favor by stating the obvious. But what bothered me more was the silence that followed. Nobody had defended me. Nobody had even looked uncomfortable. That night, I stayed late, not because I had work, but because I couldn't face going home to an empty apartment where I'd just replay the whole thing again. I was packing my bag when I noticed the company directory still open on my screen. 23 people in our department. Bradley had been here 18 months. I'd been here 6 years. The phone buzzed at exactly 9:47 p.m. I almost didn't answer. Unknown number. But something made me swipe. "Mavis?" "It's Duncan Hartwell." My stomach dropped. Duncan had been VP of Operations 3 years ago, before he left for a senior role at Cascade Industries. He'd mentored me through my first major project, the one that actually saved the company $2 million, the one Bradley now listed on his LinkedIn. "I heard something concerning today," Duncan said, his voice careful. "About how you're being treated." I didn't ask how he knew. Corporate circles are smaller than people think. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Are you?" he asked. The question hung there. I sat down. For 20 minutes, we talked. Not about Bradley, but about my current role, my responsibilities, what I actually did versus what my title suggested. Duncan asked questions that made me realize he already knew the answers. "Mavis, there are people watching," he finally said. "Leadership concerns don't stay internal for long." Before I hung up, he said one more thing. "Keep this conversation between us." I promised I would. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about something Duncan had said. Leadership concerns don't stay internal. So I did what I always do when my brain won't shut off. I made a list. 4 years ago, Bradley had been hired as department head after our previous director retired. His first major crisis came 6 weeks later when a compliance audit found gaps in our documentation system. I remembered that week clearly because I'd worked 72 hours straight, rebuilding the tracking protocols, creating templates, training the team. The audit passed. Bradley got a bonus and a profile in the company newsletter about his exceptional crisis management. His quote, "I believe in empowering my team to execute my vision." His vision. I'd written the entire system on a weekend using software I'd taught myself. 2 years later, when a client threatened to leave over service delays, I'd redesigned the workflow process that cut response time by 60%. Bradley presented it to executives as his strategic initiative. He'd changed 3 words in my presentation and put his name on the cover slide. Sitting in my kitchen at 2 a.m., I started wondering what would happen if I stopped fixing things. Bradley called me into his office the next morning. He was smiling, which was somehow worse than the meeting had been. "Yesterday was tough," he said, closing the door. But I need you to understand something. Pressure creates diamonds, Mavis. I'm pushing you because I see potential. I nodded, waiting. Take yesterday as motivation, he continued, leaning against his desk in a pose I'd seen him practice before presentations. Show me you're indispensable. The word hit differently after replaceable. This was a test. He wanted to see how much humiliation I'd absorb before I pushed back. He wanted me to work harder, prove myself, scramble to regain standing I should never have lost. I'd seen him do this before with others. Create instability, then watch them exhaust themselves seeking approval. I understand, I said. And I did. I understood exactly what he was doing. What Bradley didn't understand was that I'd already decided something during that sleepless night. I was done shielding him. Every mistake he'd almost made, every disaster I'd quietly prevented, every gap I'd filled while he took credit, I was done. From now on, he'd get exactly what he asked for. Nothing more. I started documenting everything. Not obviously. Not in a way anyone would notice. But every email I'd sent, every decision I'd made, every time Bradley had overruled me and I'd been proven right, I compiled it into a private folder. I used my personal laptop during lunch breaks, cross-referencing dates and outcomes. The patterns were stunning. March 2023, I'd recommended we upgrade our server capacity before the fiscal year rush. Bradley called it premature spending. 2 months later, we crashed during peak season, cost the company $40,000 in overtime and lost contracts. My email recommending the upgrade was still in my sent folder. His response, let's be more conservative with resources, Mavis. June 2023, I'd flagged inconsistencies in our vendor contract terms. Bradley said I was overthinking it. 3 weeks later, the vendor overbilled us by $18,000. I'd caught it, fixed it, never mentioned it again. September 2023. I'd warned that our documentation system wasn't audit ready. Bradley had forwarded my email to Patricia in HR with the note, Mavis tends to catastrophize. We're fine. We weren't fine. I'd spent the next month secretly updating everything so we'd pass. We did. Bradley got praised for maintaining compliance standards. The folder grew to 47 pages. I saved it to 3 separate drives. The announcement came during Monday's leadership briefing. Our parent company was conducting a comprehensive operational audit across all departments, scheduled for 6 weeks out. The room erupted in controlled panic. Audits meant scrutiny. Scrutiny meant someone's budget got cut or someone's job got eliminated. Bradley stood at the front, hands in his pockets, radiating the calm confidence of someone who had no idea what was actually involved. We're in excellent shape, he announced. Our systems are solid, our documentation is current, and our team is performing well. This audit will be a formality. I watched executives nod, reassured by his certainty. I said nothing. Because Bradley wasn't wrong, exactly. Our systems were solid and our documentation was current. But only because I'd made them that way. Only because I'd been quietly maintaining protocols he didn't know existed, updating records he'd never reviewed, and catching errors he'd never noticed. The audit wasn't under control because of Bradley's leadership. It was under control because I'd been working behind the scenes for 6 years, building safety nets he couldn't see. I caught Patricia's eye across the room. She was watching me. And she wasn't smiling. The exclusions started small. A calendar invitation withdrawn. A planning meeting I was suddenly optional for. Then my access to the strategy folder was quietly revoked. When I asked Bradley about it, he shrugged. We're streamlining communication channels, he said. Too many cooks in the kitchen, you know. I knew. They were preparing to replace me. The pattern was textbook: isolate the employee, limit their involvement, create distance between them and critical projects. That way, when they're gone, you can say their departure didn't impact anything important. I'd watched Bradley do this to 2 other people. First, reduce their responsibilities. Then, document their decreased contributions. Finally, exit them during a restructure with a clean narrative about performance concerns. I started keeping a log of every meeting I was excluded from, every decision made without my input, every project I'd built that was now being discussed like I'd never touched it. On Thursday, Patricia emailed me directly. Subject line, documentation request, confidential. She wanted me to create a comprehensive guide to my current processes and responsibilities, for continuity purposes. The email was professionally worded and completely transparent in its actual meaning. They wanted my knowledge before they pushed me out. I replied within an hour, happy to help. I spent 3 days writing the most technically accurate, completely useless documentation anyone could ask for. Every process was described exactly as the system indicated it should work, not how it actually worked. Every protocol was listed by its official name. Not the shortcuts and workarounds that made things function in reality. I documented procedures without context, steps without strategy, rules without the reasoning that made them effective. It was like handing someone a recipe that listed ingredients but not measurements, instructions but not temperatures, steps but not timing. Technically complete. Practically worthless. When I submitted it, Patricia thanked me for my thoroughness. Bradley barely glanced at it before forwarding it to his folder archive with the note, "Transition documentation complete." He actually thought this meant he was ready. He thought my value could be captured in a 12-page Word document. He thought processes I'd spent 6 years building and refining could be transferred like files on a hard drive. I watched him close his laptop that afternoon with the satisfied expression of someone who just checked off the last box on a termination to-do list. He had no idea what he didn't know. And I wasn't about to tell him. Duncan called again on Sunday evening. This time, the conversation was different. Cascade Industries is opening a new division, he said. Operational excellence and systems management. We need someone who can build sustainable infrastructure from the ground up. He paused. The role reports directly to the C-suite. It would put you 2 levels above your current position. I sat very still, phone pressed to my ear. We've been watching your work for a while, Mavis, Duncan continued. Not just what shows up in company reports. The actual work. The problems that don't happen because you prevent them. I thought about Bradley's smirk. About being called replaceable in front of 15 people. About 6 years of invisible labor that kept everything running while someone else collected the credit. The salary is competitive, Duncan said, then named a figure that was 40% higher than what I currently made. But more importantly, you'd have autonomy. Real decision-making authority. Your own team. He gave me 2 weeks to decide. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment, staring at nothing. For the first time in months, I felt something other than tired. I felt something like hope. But I wasn't ready to jump yet. I wanted to see this through. I wanted to watch what happened when they finally realized what I actually did. The leadership presentation was scheduled for Tuesday. Bradley had been preparing for days, rehearsing in his office with the door closed, practicing gestures in front of his window reflection. I knew what he was presenting because I'd built the entire system he was about to claim as his own. 3 years of workflow optimization, condensed into 17 slides with his name in the bottom corner. When he started talking, his confidence filled the room. He described the infrastructure improvements, the efficiency metrics, the cost savings, all numbers I'd calculated, all systems I'd designed. This integrated approach, he said, clicking to a diagram I'd drawn, represents a fundamental shift in how we manage operational complexity. I watched the executives. Most were nodding, impressed. But 2 weren't. Marcus Kane, our CFO, was frowning at the numbers. And Natalie Foster, who'd been with the company 20 years, was looking directly at me. She'd been VP when I'd first started. She'd approved my initial budget for the system Bradley was now describing. When Bradley mentioned implementation challenges we overcame, Natalie's eyebrow went up. She knew. She knew exactly who'd overcome those challenges because she'd been copied on the emails when I'd asked for additional resources. She'd seen my name on the project documentation before Bradley scrubbed it and reissued everything under his own signature. The presentation ended to polite applause. But I'd seen what I needed to see. Someone wasn't buying it. The warning came from an unexpected source. Tyler, a junior manager who'd started 6 months ago, caught me in the parking garage Thursday evening. He looked nervous. "Mavis, I probably shouldn't tell you this," he said, glancing around like we were in a spy movie. "But they're putting together a performance improvement plan." My stomach tightened. "Who's they?" "Bradley and Patricia." I overheard them in the copy room. Something about documented concerns and a formal review process. Performance improvement plans were corporate death sentences. Nobody survived them. They were designed to create a paper trail that justified termination while protecting the company from wrongful dismissal claims. "When?" I asked. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "Before the audit." They want it done before the audit. Of course they did. Get rid of me, absorb the knowledge transfer documentation, bring in someone cheaper and less experienced who wouldn't question Bradley's decisions. Then sail through the audit using systems I'd built, proving they never needed me in the first place. "Thanks for telling me," I said. Tyler nodded and hurried away. That night, I updated my resume for the first time in 6 years. And Friday morning, Bradley scheduled a one-on-one meeting. Subject line: performance discussion. I arrived at Bradley's office exactly on time. Patricia was already there, notepad ready, expression neutral. Bradley gestured to the chair across from his desk. The deliberately lower one he used for difficult conversations. "Mavis, we need to discuss some concerns about your recent performance," he began, sliding a stapled packet toward me. I didn't touch it. I knew what it said. Decreased engagement. Reduced initiative. Failure to demonstrate leadership qualities. All the carefully worded corporate language that meant, "We've decided to get rid of you and here's our justification." Specifically, Bradley continued, "We've noticed you're not adapting to our evolving departmental needs. There's a lack of strategic thinking in your current approach." I let him talk. He listed examples: projects where I'd apparently fallen short, meetings where my contributions were minimal, initiatives where I'd shown resistance to change. Every example was either something he'd excluded me from or something he'd explicitly told me to stop doing. When he finally paused, I asked one question. "Can you name a specific project in the last year where my work directly resulted in a negative outcome?" Silence. Patricia's pen stopped moving. Bradley blinked. "This isn't about specific failures, Mavis. It's about overall trajectory." "So no," I said. "No specific failures." Patricia cleared her throat. "I think we should table this discussion," she said, closing her notepad. "There are some details that need clarification." The meeting ended 5 minutes later. I walked out knowing exactly what that meant. Their case wasn't strong enough. Not yet. I resigned the following Monday. No drama. No tears. Just a simple letter stating I was providing 4 weeks' notice and thanking the company for the opportunities I'd been given. Bradley's face when I handed it to him was worth 6 years of invisible labor. "You're resigning," he said, like the concept was incomprehensible. "Yes. My last day will be October 20th. I could see him calculating. The audit was October 27th. He had 4 weeks to prepare. 4 weeks to figure out how everything actually worked. 4 weeks to discover that his useless documentation didn't contain any of the institutional knowledge I'd accumulated. "Well," he finally said, recovering his composure. "We appreciate your service. We'll, of course, accept your notice." He was trying to look disappointed, but I could see the relief. I was solving his problem. No performance improvement plan needed. No termination paperwork. Just a voluntary resignation he could spin however he wanted. By noon, leadership had accepted my resignation. By end of day, the announcement had gone out. The speed told me everything. They'd already made plans for my absence. They'd already decided I was replaceable. Now they'd find out if that was true. Bradley called an all-hands meeting Tuesday morning. The entire team crammed into the conference room, the same one where he'd called me replaceable 3 weeks earlier. As you know, Mavis has decided to pursue other opportunities, Bradley announced, standing at the head of the table like he was delivering a state address. This is a natural transition, and I want to assure everyone that our operations will continue seamlessly. He smiled. Mavis's departure actually proves something I've been saying. No single person is irreplaceable. We're a team. We adapt. We move forward. A few people clapped. Most just nodded. I sat quietly, watching Bradley bask in what he thought was vindication. Tyler caught my eye from across the table. He looked worried. We have comprehensive documentation of all current processes, Bradley continued. And we're already interviewing for a replacement. In the meantime, we'll distribute Mavis's responsibilities across the existing team. He was so confident. So absolutely certain that he'd handled this correctly. I wondered how long that certainty would last. The first missed deadline came 4 days later. A client request that should have been routine suddenly had no clear owner. The task bounced between 3 people before landing back on Bradley's desk, 6 hours past due. The client was Anderson Technologies, a mid-sized account that generated $400,000 annually. They'd submitted a technical configuration question, the kind I answered twice a week without thinking about it. Except now, nobody knew how to answer it. I watched from my desk as Bradley pulled up my documentation, scanned it, frowned, then called Tyler over. They spent 40 minutes searching through process guides and system manuals before finally submitting a partial answer that didn't address the actual question. Anderson Technologies replied within an hour. This doesn't match our previous service standard. Please escalate to your technical lead. Bradley forwarded the email to me. Can you handle this? Just this once? I replied from my personal email since my work access was already being phased out. I no longer work in that capacity. You'll need to reference the doc. Documentation provided. He tried calling. I didn't answer. By end of day, Anderson Technologies had escalated to their account executive, who escalated to Marcus Kane, who sent Bradley a very pointed email about service quality. But that was just one client. The real problem started when Bradley realized the audit was 2 weeks away and the documentation I'd provided didn't explain how anything actually connected. He'd been reviewing it in preparation, following the steps, and discovering that following the steps didn't produce the right outcomes. Because the documentation was technically accurate but operationally incomplete. It was the letter of every process without the spirit. The email review started on Wednesday. Leadership wanted to prepare for auditor questions by reviewing the decision trail for major operational changes over the past 2 years. Standard procedure. Except when they pulled the emails, they found something interesting. Every significant decision Bradley claimed ownership of had a corresponding email thread where I'd recommended that exact approach, and Bradley had initially rejected it. March 2023, server upgrade. My recommendation. Bradley's rejection. Eventual crisis. June 2023, vendor contract review. My flag. Bradley's dismissal. Eventual overbilling catch. September 2023, documentation system overhaul. My warning. Bradley's catastrophizing comment. Eventual weekend sprint to fix everything. The pattern was impossible to miss. Marcus Kane requested clarification in a meeting I wasn't invited to but heard about from 3 separate people within an hour. Bradley, these emails show Mavis recommending solutions that you later implemented after problems emerged. Can you explain the decision-making process? Bradley's response, according to Tyler who'd been taking notes. Mavis often brought up concerns prematurely. My role was to evaluate timing and resource allocation. Sometimes her ideas needed refinement before implementation. Translation: I ignored her until disasters forced my hand, then took credit for her solutions. Marcus, apparently, didn't look convinced. The meeting ended with a request for Bradley to provide additional context on his leadership approach. That afternoon, my phone rang. Bradley's name flashed on my screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Mavis, hi, he said, voice strained with false casualness. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. I'm actually in the middle of something, I lied, sitting comfortably on my couch in sweatpants. What can I do for you? Listen, we're hitting a few bumps with the audit prep. Just minor things, but it would really help if you could come in for a few hours. Temporary consulting basis, of course. We'd pay your hourly rate plus a premium. I let the silence stretch. Mavis? Are you there? I'm here. I'm just confused about why you need me. I provided comprehensive documentation, and you said the transition would be seamless. Right, yes, but there are some nuances that didn't make it into the documentation. Things you probably do automatically without thinking about them. It would just be easier if I came back and fixed everything? He exhaled. Leadership specifically asked if you'd be willing to consult. Just until we're through the audit. Leadership asked, I repeated. So this isn't you calling. This is you being told to call me. Another silence. Marcus thought it would be prudent to have your expertise available during this transition period. I smiled at my living room wall. Bradley, I don't work there anymore. You made it very clear I was replaceable. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Mavis, I hung up. 3 minutes later, he texted, please reconsider. This is important. I didn't reply. The audit began on October 27th, exactly 1 week after my last day. I wasn't there, but I heard everything. The auditors arrived at 8 a.m., led by a senior compliance officer named Helena Briggs who'd built a reputation for finding problems other auditors missed. She started with documentation review, then moved to spot checks of actual system performance. By noon, she'd flagged her first issue. Our vendor reconciliation process, which I'd managed personally for 4 years, hadn't been completed properly in the 3 weeks since I'd left. Invoices were submitted but not cross-referenced. Receipts were filed but not validated. The system I'd built required weekly attention and quarterly deep dives. Nobody had done either. Helena's second flag came that afternoon. Our client communication tracking system showed gaps. Requests logged but not resolved. Follow-ups missed. Response times doubled. Every gap had appeared in the past 3 weeks. Every problem had emerged after October 20th. By day 2, Helena's list had grown to 17 items. By day 3, Marcus Kane requested an emergency meeting with Bradley. Patricia from HR was present. So was Natalie Foster. Tyler told me later that Bradley tried to explain the issues as transition period adjustments, but Helena shut that down immediately. These aren't adjustment issues, she'd said. These are fundamental compliance gaps that indicate system failure. Marcus had asked the question everyone was thinking, when did these gaps appear? Helena consulted her notes. Every flagged item originated after October 20th. The date I'd left. Nobody said it out loud. They didn't have to. The internal review started the following week. Marcus assembled a small team, himself, Natalie, Patricia, and 2 other senior executives. Their mandate was simple: understand what happened. They started by mapping Bradley's leadership timeline against departmental performance metrics. The correlation was immediate and damning. Bradley joined, January 2022. First major success, March 2022 audit pass. My start date, August 2019. My first major project, March 2022 compliance system overhaul. Bradley's promotion to department head, June 2022. Justification: exceptional crisis management and strategic leadership. Projects credited to Bradley between 2022 and 2024, 11. Projects I'd actually built, managed, or salvaged, 11. Overlap, 100%. Natalie pulled email records going back 3 years. She found my recommendations, Bradley's rejections, subsequent problems, eventual implementations of my original solutions. She found my weekend hours logged in the system. She found evidence of work I'd done that never appeared on my timesheet because I'd done it from home to meet deadlines Bradley had created by ignoring my warnings. The review took 6 days. The conclusion took 6 minutes. On November 8th, Marcus called Bradley into a closed-door meeting. Patricia was there. So was the company's legal counsel. When someone from legal shows up, you know it's over. Tyler texted me that afternoon. Bradley's been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. They're looking into misrepresentation of contributions. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I put my phone down and went back to preparing for my first week at Cascade Industries. The call came from Natalie, not Marcus. Mavis, I owe you an apology, she said without preamble. We should have been paying attention. We should have asked questions. We didn't, and that's on us. I appreciated the directness. Thank you for saying that. I'm calling because we'd like you to consider returning. Not to your old role, to a senior leadership position reporting directly to Marcus. Complete operational authority, salary adjustment, back pay for undervalued contributions. We want to make this right. It was a good offer. Probably a great offer. But I'd already signed with Cascade. I appreciate that, Natalie. I really do. But I've already accepted another position. Silence. I understand. Can I ask where? Cascade Industries. I start Monday. I heard her breath catch. Cascade was our biggest competitor. Well, she finally said. I can't say I blame you. For what it's worth, you earned that opportunity. We talked for another 10 minutes. She wanted me to know they weren't going to just sweep this under the rug. They were conducting a full review of Bradley's tenure, his decisions, his leadership practices. They discovered patterns of credit theft, deliberate exclusion of key personnel, and misrepresentation of individual contributions as team successes. There will be consequences, Natalie said. Real ones. I believed her. After I hung up, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, exactly. Just a quiet sense of things falling into their proper place. Bradley hadn't been fired yet, but administrative leave pending investigation was just corporate speak for, we're building the case before we pull the trigger. I didn't need revenge. I just needed them to see what I'd been all along. The collapse was faster than anyone expected. Bradley's administrative leave was announced internally on November 10th with vague language about leadership review. By November 15th, 3 more compliance issues had surfaced during the ongoing audit, all tied to systems I'd maintained. By November 20th, Helena Briggs submitted her final audit report. It wasn't pretty. 17 documented compliance failures, all dating to the period after my departure. 12 operational inefficiencies that had emerged in the past month. 6 client complaints about service degradation. The report specifically noted significant institutional knowledge loss following personnel departure as a critical risk factor. Marcus presented the findings to the board. The board asked one question: why didn't we retain this person? Nobody had a good answer. On November 22nd, Bradley was officially terminated. The announcement was brief: leadership changes in operations division. Bradley Morrison is no longer with the company. We wish him well in his future endeavors. No farewell email. No appreciation for his service. Just gone. Patricia called me the next day, not to ask me to return, but to apologize personally. I should have documented what I saw in that meeting, she said. When he called you replaceable. I should have said something. You documented it, I reminded her. That mattered later. Still. You deserved better. She was right. But I'd gotten better anyway. Just not from them. The final audit report landed on December 1st. I wasn't supposed to see it, I didn't work there anymore, but Tyler sent me the relevant section. It was marked confidential, but he figured I'd earned the right to know. Section 4.7, Historical Compliance Analysis. Review of documentation from 2022 to 2024 reveals consistent compliance maintenance attributable to systematic protocols developed and managed by Mavis Thornton, former Senior Operations Coordinator. MS. Thornton's departure resulted in immediate degradation of 7 critical operational systems, suggesting her role functioned as the primary barrier preventing compliance failure. Current leadership transition has created substantial institutional knowledge gaps requiring immediate remediation. They'd named me in an official audit report. They'd credited me specifically for the work that kept everything running. The work Bradley had claimed. The work I'd done invisibly for 6 years. Section 4.8 was worse for Bradley. Former department head demonstrated insufficient understanding of operational infrastructure under his oversight. Multiple decisions reviewed in email correspondence indicate pattern of overriding technical recommendations from subject matter experts, resulting in preventable failures and cost overruns. Leadership review recommended. That was audit speak for, this person had no idea what they were doing and someone else was covering for them. Tyler's text after he sent it, thought you'd want to know. You were the reason everything worked. They finally figured it out. I saved the report. Not because I needed validation. But because sometimes it matters to have proof that you weren't imagining things. The voicemail came on December 7th. I was in my new office at Cascade Industries, reviewing system architecture for our upcoming infrastructure project, when my phone buzzed with a message from a number I'd deleted but still recognized. I almost didn't listen. But curiosity is a powerful thing. Mavis, it's Bradley. Long pause. Sound of traffic. He was outside somewhere. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't understand what you actually did. I thought. I don't know what I thought. That it was all just following procedures or something. I didn't realize how much you were holding together. Another pause. I underestimated you. Obviously. And I'm paying for that now. I just wanted you to know that I get it. I get it now. The message ended. No ask. No request for help or forgiveness. Just an acknowledgement that came 6 years too late and 3 weeks after it could have made any difference. I stood at my window, looking out over downtown, and deleted the message without replying. Some people only learn when the consequences become unavoidable. Bradley had spent 18 months taking credit, dismissing warnings, and believing his own narrative about strategic leadership. Now he was unemployed with an audit report documenting his failures and a termination on his record from a company that had to explain to its board why they'd let their most valuable operations person walk away. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Duncan. First team meeting went great. Your infrastructure proposal is exactly what we needed. Welcome to Cascade. I smiled and went back to work. The news reached me on January 15th, 3 months after I'd left. Marcus had called, which was unusual since we'd only spoken once since my departure. I thought you should know, he said. We just finalized a contract with Cascade Industries. Your new company is absorbing our entire operations division as an outsourced service provider. I sat very still, processing. What happened to Bradley's old department? It doesn't exist anymore. After the audit, the board decided our operational infrastructure was too critical to manage internally without the right expertise. When Cascade proposed taking it over, it solved multiple problems simultaneously. And who's overseeing the contract from Cascade's side? I asked, though I already knew. According to the paperwork, you are. You're listed as the primary account manager and systems architect. I looked at the contract sitting on my desk, the one Duncan had handed me that morning with a smile. Mavis, you're about to manage the same work you used to do, Marcus said. Except now you have complete authority, proper resources, and a team that actually reports to you. The board specifically requested you because they trust your expertise. And Bradley? Gone. We haven't heard from him since December. I doubt we will. After I hung up, I walked to Duncan's office. He was expecting me. You knew, I said. When you offered me this job, you knew this contract was coming. He nodded. We'd been in preliminary talks for months. When I heard what happened to you, I saw an opportunity. Not just for us, for you. You deserve to do the work you're brilliant at without someone taking credit. I thought about everything that had happened. Being called replaceable. Being pushed out. Being vindicated. And now being given authority over the exact systems I'd built, with the recognition and resources I'd never had. Thank you, I said. Duncan smiled. You were never replaceable, Mavis. You were the reason everything worked. Now everyone knows it.